Welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast, presented by Orion Advisor Solutions and hosted by Dr. Daniel Crosby, Orion's Chief Behavioral Officer and New York Times best-selling author. Each week, Dr. Crosby interviews a fascinating new guest on a range of compelling topics, from literature to psychology to financial wellness. To learn more about Dr. Crosby's behavioral finance work at Orion, visit www.orion.com.
Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I am your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Kristin Shea, who is a sought-after consultant and business coach at Triad Partners. She's here today to talk about something really fascinating, neuromarketing, which is the measurement of neural activity to give us insights into consumer motivations, preferences, and decision-making styles. Welcome.
Hey, man, what's going on?
Not much. Just here to talk about neuromarketing with your big brain, and we're excited to have you on here to break it down for us. So welcome. Where are you joining us from today?
I am joining you all from the beautiful Midwest, Lawrence, Kansas. It's it's a change. Grew up in Northern Virginia, but it's growing on me. Although if you ask me in 2 months in the middle of winter that answer might change. I don't know.
I was not going to rub that in, but great spot though, beautiful spot and good people. So
yes, very nice people who drive the speed limit, much more so than Northern Virginia.
Awesome.
It's kind of crazy to be in a place where you're a jerk if you're going the speed limit, like passing on the right, going the speed limit. But there's a lot of things I can learn from the people in the Midwest.
Very great. So I wanted to start today with a quote from Nobel laureate Francis Crick. He called this the astonishing hypothesis, the idea that all human thoughts, feelings, and actions are just the products of neural activity in the brain. So it's astonishing, I think, because it has really big implications for philosophy, religion, morality, and things like that. We won't get into all of that today. But neuromarketing takes this approach that neural activity is sort of the most fundamental thing, that it's the bottommost turtle of all investor and consumer behavior. Tell us a bit about neuromarketing and why you think it's so powerful and sort of what got you into it.
I want to first of all comment and say that saying it's the bottommost turtle threw me for one. I was waiting to see if you were going to say turtle live. I didn't know if that was a typo or not. Bottommost turtle. Does that just mean foundational?
Yeah. So there's this old tale, right, of this person who gives this complicated lecture on the origins of the universe.
Oh, okay.
In this sort of apocryphal tale, this woman comes up to him afterwards and says, "Hey, that's not how the universe works. There's a turtle that holds up the world." And so then this professor said, well, what holds up the turtles? And she goes, well, it's turtles all the way down. So turtles all the way down is the name of a fantastic Sturgill Simpson song, incidentally. But it's also sort of this idea of the bottommost turtle is sort of the thing that's most foundational or most fundamental. So not a typo in the questions I sent you. I really meant, what does it mean for this to be sort of the most foundational thing?
It's awesome. I love turtles. I have a turtle tattoo. So noted. Turtles all the way down.
Yep.
So great question. And I think there are two answers, right? What is neuromarketing and why does it matter? So the first answer, neuromarketing, big fancy word. It's funny because it's kind of a contradiction to everything that neuromarketing stands for, which is just simplicity among other things. But neuromarketing, really high level, is the neuroscience of consumer decision-making. The way it shows up in practice is it's basically the study of the brain's response using functional MRIs, brain scans. As technology continues to evolve, the tools that neuromarketers are using have also evolved. So we can now use eye tracking, right, at a deeper level, a lot of implications about where our eyes go, about the way that we perceive and pay attention to different marketing stimuli. Now with some of those really fancy watches, like the Apple watches or like the rings that track your heart rate, your blood pressure, your body temperature, stuff like that. is going to be able to unveil, I think, a whole nother layer of information and data in regards to neuromarketing. But it's a pretty new study. It's a pretty new form of marketing. It really emerged in the early 2000s. And one of the big landmark studies that is kind of noted as the launch point when it really started to get attention the seeds were planted way earlier than the early 2000s, 1975, right? There's a blind taste test between Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Which one do you like better? And they say, not surprisingly, although I'm more of a Coke person myself, most people went towards Pepsi. I like this one better. It's sweeter, so on and so forth. So fast forward to the early 2000s, you look at who has the greater market share, and it's Coca-Cola across the board. That's where consumers have the bigger preference. So what they did, 2003, was they used all of their, MRI, brain scan technologies. I'll use the caveat, I am not a neuroscientist. I'm just somebody who really loves marketing and has a background in psychology. So not the person to ask on all of the nitty gritties of brain scan technology. Anyways, hooked the people up, did the same thing, blind taste test, no labels. Which one do you like better? The response to both of them was actually equal, 50-50. Half the people like Coca-Cola, half the people like Pepsi. And then they revealed the brand of each one and the brain's response, where the activity lit up in the brain, and the part of the brain that represents our survival, our subconscious instincts, and then where our emotional system is, our limbic system, lit up in favor of Coca-Cola, and the responses changed, where instead of it being a 50-50 split, it ended up being a 3-to-1 preference for Coca-Cola over Pepsi. So wow, holy crap. As the first time ever seeing that kind of data, be like, okay, there's something that's happening here based off of the branding and the understanding, not the product itself, but the way that it shows up and the associations that it makes for people at a subconscious level. There are implications as to how that leads them to make certain decisions and have certain preferences. So neuromarketing, it's gotten a lot of traction. It's had a lot of naysayers, but as the technology, because it's like, well, how could you really know? The naysayers are continuing to fade, because as the technologies continue to get better, there's always the critic saying, well, is this unethical to be able to use these insights to quote unquote manipulate people? I think, one, you always want to be ethical in the way that you're communicating with an audience or being persuasive towards using product or service or whatever. But the other thing is, if you have a business that's worth existing, that deserves to exist, if you have a service that people need to have, then when you're being ethical, I think there's a lot of value in helping people understand where you can help them make their lives better based off of what will land the fastest. So that's one. What is neuromarketing? Second piece, why is it so important? I kind of just mentioned that. I kind of just answered that question, but you think about the word Homo sapien, right? Human beings are Homo sapiens. Homo sapien literally translates to the words, the one that thinks. We do more thinking than any other species on the planet, right? I mean, thank God, here I am. We're talking on two camera screens on the other side of the world. Thinking has really served us, other side of the country. But I operate in an industry with financial services. I work with financial advisors where they tend to create experiences, their marketing messages, the client experiences for people that aren't even just prospects are really making people do more thinking than they need to, and often ends up to their detriment. I'll back it up. Neuromarketing, and I'm not going to get into the anatomy of the brain, but high level, there's the part of our brain that does all of the thinking, right? That part of our brain, it's very slow. It thinks about the past, present, and the future. It's able to do the complex math. It understands complex language. It's a newer part of our brain, right? The other parts of our brain, we call it the old brain, has where your emotions are happening, your reptilian system, that's where your emotions are processed, your subconscious, your drives, your instincts happen. Ideally, in today's world, we need to be able to talk to people, to talk to the part of the brain, get straight to the buy button, if you will, to their subconscious that helps them make quick, fast decisions that help them feel closer to you and move them in the direction that you would like them to take, get them to take that next step that you want them to take as a marketer or somebody who's trying to grow their business or have great relationships, et cetera. Bring it back, financial advisors, having a financial plan, right? That's a very pie in the sky. You can't walk into a furniture store and try on a financial plan in the same way that you could just sit on a couch, right? And that makes it very difficult inherently as an industry to kind of keep out of the thinking part of your brain, because what advisors often end up hearing is, I don't know, I have to think about it. We're asking a whole lot of questions because they don't really understand it. They don't understand the value. And neuromarketing lays out a really fantastic framework for saying, if you incorporate these 6 things along with, these other general themes, you're going to be able to help people speed up the decision-making process, get to yeses faster, and do so in a way that is a lot deeper in their hearts. It's instinctual, it's subconscious. And then, aside from that, they can justify it rationally when they think about it afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like your Coke and Pepsi example, and not just because I'm a huge Diet Coke fan who lives in Atlanta, right? I mean, it's interesting that when you do this blind taste test, it's effectively 50-50. But then when you reveal the branding, there's a considerable preference for the one with the superior marketing. I know this is going to hurt some people's feelings, but I mean, there's like 300,000 advisors in the US. A lot of the offering is very similar, right? Like a lot of the offering from one advisor to the next, there's certainly some standouts, but a lot of it's going to look the same, right? Just the same way that Coke and Pepsi are relatively undifferentiated. When you sort of strip away the marketing, it's going to be financial planning. It's going to be asset allocation. It's going to be behavioral coaching, investment management. All this stuff is going to look relatively similar, or at least be perceived as relatively similar from one advisor to the next. And so what can we do to be Coke and not Pepsi? One of the things that I love about you have probably the best LinkedIn presence of anyone I know. I mean, you have these really eye-catching graphics and videos and things that you post on LinkedIn, and you do a great job of standing out. And I think that is increasingly hard. I sort of know this intuitively, but I did a little research for our conversation today and found that the current estimate is that we are exposed to between 6,000 to 10,000 branded messages a day, which is up 100% from just 2007. So can you talk about the implications of this war for attention and where neuromarketing sort of fits in this battle for people's attention?
Yeah, that number was surprising. You shared it before this conversation. Last time I looked at it, which was in the spring, it was 4,000. So I was probably just not looking in the right place, but I wouldn't be surprised if that number continued to increase. Sure. It's interesting.
Yeah, and yeah. I'm not wed to 4,000 or 6,000 or 10,000, but even if it was 400, it's a lot, right?
Dude, so many.
So many.
I mean, you're probably right. I'm at 6,000, 7,000. It's probably 107,000 every day. Who knows? Thousands. But dude, that's so much. Plus everything else that you have to do. Like dog rings the bell, has to go outside. Your spouse, God forbid, wants to have a conversation with you about how your day was, or need you to bring just random things, get your attention. I almost had a bad, I don't know. Okay, whatever. I'll throw it out there. All the things competing for your attention. Like your spouse needs toilet paper in the bathroom, stop what you're doing, get up, go give it to him. There's just so much. Sorry, Joe, that was weird. I don't know. It's the first one that came to mind. From an economic perspective, we are now in what's called and often referred to as the attention economy, right? So any financial advisor listening to this is going to understand this. Studied economics. Economics is founded upon the principle of scarcity, right? How do we allocate a limited resource over an unlimited one? There's only so much attention that we can give out. There's an unlimited demand for our attention, right? Over the years, historically, go back thousands of years, it was shelter, it was food, labor, land. And then, fast forward to today, first world society in the United States of America, with technology, we have an abundance of information. And Nobel laureate who originally coined the attention economy says, in an abundance of information, we have a limitation of attention, right? It's interesting because in a lot of ways, attention is like money, right? In two big ways. One, every time that you give your attention to one thing, you're ignoring something else. Like, it's always an exchange. Mm-hmm. The other piece is there's also kind of like there's a wealth gap. There's an attention gap. Like, there's a gap between the people that are getting the most consumer attention, the big massive brands, Coca-Cola. I mean, they're getting a lot of attention, influencers, et cetera. And then, other people, probably financial advisors trying to build a business, that are getting a lot less attention. So we're already kind of getting set up for a really long uphill battle to try to capture people's attention in a world where they're getting bombarded with 7,000 advertisements a day. And we need to take it a step further, get people to understand the value of what we're trying to do to, understand that, first of all, get them to say, hey, look, I'm going to listen to what this person is going to say. And then once you do get their attention, make sure that you keep it and you don't send them into the part of their brain that says, like, wait a second, we're talking about like air right now. Your financial plan, it doesn't make any sense to me. I need to think about it. I'm not really sure. And then end up not making a decision. It being able to short circuit the ability to get people's attention has never been more important than it is today. And it is going to continue to get more and more important every single day.
Yeah. So let's talk about the insights that neuromarketing can bring to this war from attention, and what we can learn so we can be more like you and really stand out in our social media efforts and things like that. You were kind enough to send me a great presentation of yours, wherein you lay out this sort of 6-pillar framework for distilling down neuromarketing to its essence, right? Something like neuromarketing can feel hard to get its hands around, but you're out there sharing this 6-pillar framework. Talk a little bit about where you came up with, or where you sourced these 6 pillars, if you will, and then let's get into the first one, which is that things need to be made personal. Why is it important to make things personal in our marketing efforts? And what does that look like sort of concretely?
Yeah, 100%. So this is not my 6 principle framework. It's been established inside of the neuromarketing field, and any type of neuromarketing research that you look to, they're going to generally reference these main 6 factors, influencers. I wouldn't, and there are so many principles of influence out there, right? Like, you think about Robert Cialdini's 7 principles of influence. I mean, and the unlimited biases that you speak to on a daily basis. It's interesting. They all kind of complement each other. But what else, and, they all kind of reference each other and overlap. Like Roger Dooley, who's kind of like the founder of, or like the godfather of neuromarketing, him and Robert Cialdini are best friends. So this 6 principle, these 6 factors inside of neuromarketing, they don't compete with any of the other things. I would just look at it through the lens of, these are the 6 general categories that have triggered specific responses inside of the brain, if that makes sense. Sure. I was originally introduced to this by one of my mentors in the business. So it's something that was ingrained in me really early and often. So definitely I'm a voice for the good word today, sir.
Let's talk about making things personal then. This is the first of these 6 pillars that make up the good word of neuromarketing. What does it mean to personalize? And if you could give us an example from the world of financial services about how we can personalize our offering or our marketing message.
Yeah. Making things personal. You could, and I just want to throw it out there to say, I hate, or I have a hard time when I listen to a podcast where I think I'm going to get a lot of tactics and I'm not going to get any at all. So if it's okay with that, I'd love to be able to throw out a couple different examples on each of these that are just super easy to implement. At a high level, personal, this makes sense, right? I mean, the subconscious part of our brain, it's a super self-centered entity. It's just worried about itself, survival, reproduction, breathing, food, all of that. So it's really not concerned with the things that don't concern them. So really quick way to get people's attention is to make people feel like what you're saying and what you're doing means something to them. What does this mean for me? Right? You see that show up in marketing, in the best marketers all the time, right? So one of the best performing email subject lines that you could ever use uses the sweetest word on the planet to any given person, their name. Mm-hmm. Name. Have you seen this? It's personal. Oh, that's my name. Mm-hmm. Another example, when I record video emails, instead of just having the preview of me getting ready to talk, I'll write the name on a whiteboard so that they can see the preview. Hey, name. They're like, my name is on this. Like, this video message is for me. Mm-hmm. You see it showing up by simply talking to the you. What are you doing? What have you thought about this? You have this decision to make. What are you going to do in order to make that decision? And then also things personal relates to the things that they care about, right? Which kind of feels like a no-brainer, but people's family, speaking to the things that they love. I think it's important to once the relationship has been established, and probably more in a client relationship or client experience way, to take the things that they find important to them and make it yours as well. This is ours. These are not your goals. These are ours, so that you also become something that's very personal to them. The big example that I often end up going towards as a no-brainer, and I think just as a major missed opportunity inside of the financial services industry in general, is to have a niche. Okay. When you're talking to the general public, you talk to everybody, you're talking to nobody. So the stories that you're telling, the messages you're sharing can't really be too personal, because you're talking to 1,000 different people. So if you think about for advisors, for example, go to their website. What do they say they do? We do investment planning. We do tax planning. We do long-term care. We do college planning. We do life insurance. We do wealth transfer. We do buy and sell, retirement income planning, yada, yada, yada. How memorable is that going to be? Or how personal can you get when you're speaking to all of these things, where the person that is going to make that phone call or click, yes, I'd like to have a meeting with this person, is probably only like really one thing that they're worried about, right? So an alternative would be, hey, I focus on Social Security, for an example, right? All of your messages are telling stories about Social Security that resonate with somebody that's getting ready to make decisions about Social Security. And then once they come in, you can talk to them about all of that other stuff, right? But you've made that connection by speaking to their specific personal problem, and that you can help them solve on the front end in a way that gets their attention and helps crowd out get all the noise out.
Yeah, I love that. I'll never forget the first time I went to a cheesecake factory and saw that like enormous menu. And I was like, there's just no way they can do all this well. Like, there's no way, there's no way that you do sushi and pizza and tacos and salads and steaks and everything, and you do it all well. And I think people have that same impulse when we just try and be everything to everyone. Much better to make it personal. I like how you brought in, it reminds me of Robert Cialdini's principle of liking. We want to connect with people around the things that they like, and we want to show them the ways in which we are alike. So that's an element of personalization. So great tactics there. The second one I want to get to was the least obvious to me. Like a lot of these 6, when I was going through your presentation, I was like, yep, I get it. The second one was contrastable. What do you mean to make your marketing effort contrastable? What does that look like practically?
Dude, contrast is my favorite. Contrast is the coolest one to me, because once it's been put on your radar, you see it everywhere. Give you an example. How many times have you ever seen an advertisement between, a skinny person and an overweight person? Well, flip it. Overweight person, skinny person, before and after. That's contrast. Sure. Right? Day and night. That's contrast. Right? Before and after. You see the before and after photos. Contrast is everywhere. You go back to the part of our brain that makes quick, safe, instinctive decisions, survival, right? It's looking for things that don't seem normal. And it's looking for things that look normal as a way to say, okay, this is safe, and okay, maybe this isn't safe. It's something that we're instinctively trained to look for. What's different here, right? So that can work for you, or it can work against you. So contrast can work for you in ways that you're being different and you're standing out from what they would associate to be something that they don't want to, they don't want to involve themselves with, or they don't want to use, or, a route they don't want to take. On the other hand, a lack of contrast can hurt you. One, because you're not standing out. If they've passed on everything else that looks and sound exactly like how yours does it really serve you to look and sound just like everyone else looks and sounds, right? Mm. And then there are visual ways that you can do it as well. But just to stay on that, you talk to advisors, you hear advisors say all the time, or often, I think it's less now, but like one of the common seminar educational workshop openers is, can I get a show of hands if you've ever been to a seminar before? Well, tonight's not going to be like that, right? Mm-hmm. But if someone's gone to a bunch of seminars or a bunch of workshops and they hear somebody else say that and they hear you say that, there's no contrast. What you're thinking is, okay, so this person is no different than the last person that I didn't book an appointment with. On the other hand, you can get a lot of attention inside of conversations by simply saying, hey, look, everybody tells you this, but I'm going to tell you this. Imagine that as a seminar opener. They're like, whoa, mm-hmm. Wow, that's different, right? You see it visually show up. And I've actually got a great story for advisors. See it visually show up on a whiteboard, right? So, okay, I'm in the index annuity space. I used to be an annuity wholesaler. Now I am a business coach, but we do still work with advisors using annuities. And one of the examples that I would use back when I originally built this presentation would be to say, great example, visual contrast. An index annuity, right, is supposed to help mitigate the risk on the downside and help capture a portion of the upside, right? Where it would show a picture of the S&P up and down all crazy, and then the index annuity where you get a part of the up and the down. So it's a visual contrast. Which one makes more sense? So there are ways that you can visually do that using colors, for example, right? So when you have a call to action on a website, you can use a really bright color to get them to pay attention to the button that says submit, book appointment. Interesting fact, the best color, the highest performing color for those types of buttons is orange for a call to action button. I was thinking about it before we did this interview, and I almost wonder, I probably am way overthinking it. I don't know if there's actually a reason, but I almost wonder if it has something to do with fire, as like an instinctual survival thing, I don't know.
For the evolutionary psychology, I like it. So
right.
Everything, again, you started out by saying this, and I'm seeing it as we talk, that there's all these intersections with other parts of behavioral finance and motivational theory that we know. We know that people have stickier memories for no than yes. And so when you say, here's how we're different, which is effectively saying, this is what we don't do, like every financial advisor you've met does XYZ thing, and they do it ABC way. We do it this different way. Here's what we don't do. I love it at a restaurant. Sometimes I'll be about to order fish or whatever, and the restaurant, the waiter will say, like, look, no, don't get that. Like, the fish is not good, but the steak is great. And, you're effectively drawing a contrast between, this is not great, this is great. There's nothing I hate more when they say, well, everything's good. Like, everything we do here, we do well. Like, no contrast. It's weirdly more persuasive to hear that they have a bad dish. And that's a little counterintuitive, right? It's a little counterintuitive. You're like, I'm at this restaurant and this person in the know has just told me that this is a subpar order. And weirdly, knowing that has created some contrast that gives me more faith in this other dish. So I think it's, everything from the layout of your website to the way that you sort of compare and contrast your services. I think it's an interesting thing to think about that. Yep. As promised, I'm starting to see everywhere.
Well, that's kind of like anchoring, right, Daniel?
Right.
It's, you show them the first number that you show them is the one that they're going to anchor to and use as a point of reference for the next thing. I think that is a great example of a complement between behavioral economics and neuromarketing and this contrast principle.
So for this third one, I'm going to count on your ability to do what you've done already in this conversation and make things practical. The third one is tangible. Now, we work in an economy now where 70% of us work in knowledge fields. That's certainly true of the industry in which we find ourselves. And like you said, it's not like a couch, right? You can't come in and sort of sample, a financial advisor's offering the same way you sample, the chicken at the food court or the couch at the furniture store. How do we in knowledge fields take this sort of ethereal offering and make it more tangible?
Yeah. Another really fun one. So in neuromarketing, I'll tell you a personal story. I'll tell you an advisor story, one of my favorite advisor stories, and then I'll give you some tactics. The part of the old part of the brain that neuromarketing refers to, it's the reptilian brain. They call it that because every single species on the planet, it has this part of their brain, right? So it's something that we all share. And we talk about the reptilian brain, it's language that they use. And what I would do before these presentations, I would go and buy like 100 little $1 lizards and put them on everybody's desk where they were sitting inside of the audience. And I would say their reptilian brain, it's like a lizard, like it's not very smart. It's it can't do math. It's just focused on survival and what's right in front of it. So, when you're crafting a message, put this on your desk and think to yourself, is this going to speak to the reptilian brain? Neuromarketing the reptilian brain, that's all up in the air, but you can make it tangible, right? By, in this example, using like a prop that gives you a point of reference and something to kind of hold on to that you already can associate with. This, quote unquote, reptilian brain, older part of our brain, it doesn't know, it barely understands words, right? So like scalable infrastructure or like comprehensive strategy, like it doesn't mean anything intuitively to us instinctively. One office that I work with, okay, they're up in the Northeast. 10 years ago, they were bringing on about $12 million a year in new business. Okay. Their firm-wide closing rate was 2%. And oftentimes what they ended up hearing was, I have to think about it, right? It's kind of like the bane of an advisor's existence. Fast forward to today, they're bringing on over $200 million a year with an 80% close rate across the firm. And that's including the first deployment when they pretty much just discount anybody that's not interested, which is a whole nother story. It's really incredible. But one of the first things that they did, they kind of changed the trajectory of their firm. Three things. I'll reference the third one later on. But the two are they took two big steps to make what they were proposing to their prospective clients very tangible. First of all, they trademarked their process. They named and they're trademarked their process. So it's not kind of we do this thing and that thing and this thing, we're going to build a financial plan and it's going to go all the way out into the future and it's going to include this thing or that thing. It's a name, the blank, the whatever, and it's trademarked. So it's packaged. It becomes something that is tangible. Okay, this is like a thing. The other one that I think is that kind of like blew the doors off of it for them was a lot of times, right? There's a lot of paper and graphs and images and information that advisors are trying to pass along and communicate to their prospective clients. Hey, look, all these charts, all this stuff, but it's all, again, pie in the sky. The financial plan, you can't hold it. You can't wear it like a jacket. Can't drink it on a cold day in the Midwest. So what they did was in addition to trademarking, branding their process, was they got a binder, really nice leather-bound binder, and put the plan documents inside of it. Other techniques being used, but overall, it becomes this tangible thing that sits in the conference room every single time a prospect comes in. We're going to give you this plan, right? I'm going to give you a plan. It's this thing. You want this, right? We've got your name on it. This can be yours. It becomes something and they're like, okay, I have something to show for this. And their close rates and everything just went through the roof. This is so much easier to communicate what they were trying to sell. Do you want this plan or not? Instead of 50,000 other decisions and graphs and numbers.
Yeah, so there's two comments there. So first of all, I love the lizard thing because we all know, we've spoken about on this podcast, sort of the poor rate of retention of any sort of educational initiative, right? Such a big part of an advisor's job is educating, his or her clients about the impact of their behaviors and how markets work and all these things. But retention is universally poor, right? I mean, it's poor in any kind of educational setting, especially something complicated like finance. But I love this idea of a simple, inexpensive marker, physical token that sort of brings someone back to an intellectual concept. Like, here's this simple reminder of whatever it is I'm trying to keep top of mind with my clients. I think that's brilliant. I think that's something advisors could easily implement. The other thing I'll never forget, going to see this psychologist speak, a psychologist, I'm not going to say his name, but he was someone who was in roughly the same world as me, pre sort of my focus on behavioral finance. And he was charging 10x what I was. And perhaps over optimistically, I would say wasn't 10x better than me, right? And so I went and spoke to him, went and saw him speak. And I said, look, we have similar educational backgrounds. He's a bit older than me, more experienced. But I said, look, we have similar educational backgrounds. How are you able to do this and I'm not? Effectively, how are you able to charge such a premium when I'm not? And he showed me something. He showed me a card. And on the back, he had his little 4-step process for improvement. And he's like, I've got a model and you don't. And like, that was it. Like his he's like this little triangle, his 4-step fail-proof process. And like, that was it. I was still out here in the ether, right? Like I hadn't made my stuff tangible. He had. And so I really tried to learn from that, right? And so you see my work from that time to this is like, the sort of 4 meta pillars of behavioral finance. You've got the 3 sort of pillars of behavior change. All of this is taking this knowledge that sits out there, sort of unformed, ethereal, hard to work with, build it into a process or a system. It really does make all the difference. So I think that's such a powerful concept. And now I got to go get a little lizard.
Dude, that's nuts.
Right.
He was like, well, actually, here's what it is. Oh, wow, that's such a great example.
Yeah.
I love that. It's interesting, the lizards thing on the props. I mean, that's just such a simple, easy thing that also helps make you more memorable, which I guess is next, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's one office, a couple great examples. One office I worked with, and instead of doing the regular educational workshop with the PowerPoint and they're like, investments and taxes are going this way, they would, no PowerPoint, have a table. He would bring his chainsaw and his hammer and all of his tools. And he would talk about the different aspects of a plan, the different risks to a plan, the different tools that you could use them within the context of a tool, right? It's something tangible that people can make sense of. This office actually did another thing that I thought was amazing. They had a meeting room. It was a dinosaur room. It was, had a bunch of dinosaurs. It was like Jurassic Park decor. I don't know how they landed on that, but what they would do is inside of their funds that they would use for their clients, instead of it being the global A shares, whatever, they would call it a different dinosaur name. This is the Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is the Velociraptor. This is the Triceratops. And it became a lot more tangible for people to understand. And then it also became more referable, right? Dude, my advisor, we're in the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like, that's awesome. He took me, I had a little bit in the Tyrannosaurus. I'm a little bit of a T-Rex in retirement, but I'm also a Triceratops. Like, it's such a talk trigger that and they're limitless. I like ways that you can do that. Buckets for bucket planning, putting money in the buckets on the table, like so easy.
So tell me this, we're on number 4 now, right? Memorable. Dinosaurs and chainsaws certainly qualify. Does your approach need to turn some people off? Because like when I hear about dinosaurs, I'm like, if I walked into an advisor's office and they started to talk to me about dinosaurs, I'd be like, like, I don't think this is a great fit, but I can definitely see how that would work for other people. Like, is it do we try and become everything to everyone? Do we try to become too vanilla? And does being memorable necessitate rubbing some people the wrong way?
Oh, dude, let me give you one of my favorite quotes. Your marketing is like a magnet. Don't forget that magnets work both ways. They attract and they also repel.
Yeah.
The best performing content that I've ever put up on LinkedIn is the content that I click upload and then I'm like, oh no, like this isn't going to go over maybe as well as I'd hope. Like, I know there are going to be people that are not really thrilled about this, or this doesn't really resonate with, but you don't want to work with them anyway. Like, like the people that don't, I mean, gosh darn it, if you love dinosaurs and you want to name your portfolios after dinosaurs, what a buzzkill for you to have somebody come in that's like, ugh, like this is corny. I hate dinosaurs. You'd be like, oh man, but like, I think this is so cool. Like I worked so hard on this. Like life is way too short and there are way too many people out there to not get super hyper focused on what you love. Right. And not, there are two rounds we have to keep in mind. 2 P's. Where are you profitable? But also where are you passionate? Finding that overlap is the key to success long-term, with happiness being a big part of success.
Yeah. I love that magnet analogy. And like, I understand that I'm a killjoy, right? Like I understand that fun.
Yeah, you're the worst.
I am the worst. Like I understand that fun people will like the dinosaurs and I don't, but that's okay. Like, that's what you want. And I think we as an industry spend so much time trying to be inoffensive and trying to be sort of neutral and beigey as an industry, that I think we really leave a lot of opportunity on the table by not having an opinion. By not, that's my biggest pet peeve about conferences too. You get these panel of people who often look the same, dress the same, and then agree on everything. And you're like, no, like have an opinion, like have a thesis, have a point of view, put that out there. Know that there are a lot of people who are going to agree with you, maybe more people who don't, and that's fine. It's a big world full of people who love and hate dinosaurs. So
look at some of the biggest names. I know we got to keep going, but the biggest names like Ken Fisher, Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, we all know who they are, love them or hate them, but it's because they had an opinion. So I love that.
Yeah.
Have an opinion. We just have an opinion.
Great point. Yeah, it's a great point. So the 5th one is visual. Right? I think the easy, like the low hanging fruit here has to do with sort of logo and branding and things like that. But I have a feeling you mean more than that here. So how do we make our brand visually stand out?
Yeah. Visual. So I'll start off by sharing an example with you of an experiment done in the neuromarketing field. Okay. There was an airport in Austria that was having a lot of spillage problems in men's bathrooms. So I guess they're missing the urinal and getting pee all over the floor. I guess that's what the spillage is, like the polite word for that. Anyways, so neuromarketers, scientists come in and say, hey, what if we put a fly, what looks like a fly, like a little sticker inside of the urinal? Would they aim at it? Would it get people to pee in the urinal and not on the floor? And it did. In fact, it decreased the spillage by 80%. Because I guess they'd want to hit the fly. I don't know. I guess that's how that works. So visually, there are massive implications outside of just like what your brand looks like, but in getting people to look where you want them to look, right? Getting people to pay attention and what, where you want them to pay attention. Going back now that we've used the reptilian word, we'll just bring it back to that. The reptilian brain, they're not, they use, visual cues instinctively, again, are used to determine what's safe, right? You see fast movement. Oh, is this safe? So our eyes are trained to look for certain things, and visual cues are processed way faster than anything that we hear, which most people know. It's interesting. Visually, I see there being a massive opportunity from a digital marketing perspective. And I know advisors are told all the time to use video, but this is a great testament to it. This is why video content is king. It's what people engage with the most. It's people's eyes just go straight for it. there are some really interesting things that you can do to drive attention from a visual perspective. If you test 2 landing pages where you have, there's one example that I've seen. So there's a baby, some kind of landing page outside of the industry by some kind of baby product. Okay. Landing page number 1, the baby is just kind of sitting there and looking out at the person who's looking at the screen. In the second landing page, the baby is kind of rotated, but facing down and looking at the submit button, that call to action button. And the submission rates, the conversion rates were exponentially higher when the baby was looking at call to action button. Mm-hmm. So that's, I guess, just like a really quick tactic is you can use people's faces on your websites to point to the form, the subscribe now, the register for the event, using images that have them look at them. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. I think there's so much work that can be done. Emily Bender, I don't know if you know Emily, but Emily was on earlier this year, friend of the show, and she does a lot with sort of audio branding, if you will. But I do think the more immersive our brands are, the better, right? Like we should have an auditory presence. We should have a visual presence that's memorable. And going back to this principle of magnetism and attracting and repelling, I think, again, we're still very often going for sailboats and mountaintops and, all these things that sort of have no real differentiation from a visual perspective and don't do much to set us apart. So I do think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. The last one, Kristin, is emotional. Now, this, big nod from me here. This is consistent with all the behavioral finance literature. I do want to talk about, though, whether our emotional appeals need to be consistent with sort of our greater brand image. Amazon, for instance, who when I think about Amazon, I think of the adjectives, quick and efficient, right? Like that's what I want from Amazon. I want quick, cheap, efficient. That's what I want and expect from Amazon. They've done a lot of commercials lately that will call sort of appeals to the heart, sort of tearjerker type appeals. And I think it's a response to them being accused of mistreating their employees. I think they're trying to reshape their image. But when I see these commercials, I'll be honest, they land a little flat with me because I'm like, I don't need you to be, Mother Teresa, Amazon. I need you to be what you are. Be the soulless corporate giant you are and get me my scissors quickly. Stop. It feels false to me. So when we're creating emotional experiences, do we need to be careful to make them consistent with who we are, or can they ever backfire? Speak to that if you would.
Oh, dude. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, going back to, I think it was Pepsi, Kendall Jenner campaign that was supposed to be a feel-good commercial where she gave the Coke to the police officer that totally backfired. So 100%. I think the question that you have to ask yourself is, one, am I going to use emotion or am I not going to use emotion? Am I going to go for an emotion angle or am I not going to go for an emotional angle? And then from there, you decide, do I want to be positive? Do I want to be inspiring? Do I want to make people laugh? Or do I want to strike some fear into them? I'll tell you what, from a content perspective, content that strikes an emotional chord gets shared, gets much higher engagement, obviously, than the content that doesn't. But from a data perspective, the content that is inspiring, funny, entertaining, that isn't like the sad puppy at the shelter with like that really sad song, the commercial everybody knows about. The really uplifting content is shared, engaged with at a higher, that next exponent, much higher than the negative content. I'll tell you what, dude, we're at Triad Partners. Okay. We started a year ago. The background was kind of in the IMO space, and the philosophy and the mission has been to do everything differently than the way that they are traditionally done in the IMO space. And instead of we're moving away from something, we're moving to something. It's, hey, like, think of all of these things that you can accomplish, because it is such an important message, to want to inspire people, but it has landed way better. It has resonated on a much deeper and more powerful level to make people feel good. You just might be a jerk, and just like, don't care about the warm and fuzzies. Although I'm just kidding. I have a hard time with it where it's like, if it's like super sappy, and that's like where authenticity comes in. Like, don't be super corny just because you're trying too hard, because you're not going to get the right attention. It's not a good look.
Here's the thing. I'm very sappy. Like, I'm happy to cry. I'm happy to cry at a St. Jude's commercial, right? Like, I'm not going to cry on an Amazon commercial. I think it's just about that brand consistency. It's interesting what you brought up, sort of bringing up negative emotion. The behavioral research here is interesting because it says sort of scaring people straight only works if you provide an out, right? If you induce an emotion of fear or concern or negativity, that can be powerful short term to move people, but only if you give them a direction. There's been interesting research on, smoking cessation programs and trying to stop the spread of different diseases, and scaring people straight sort of in a vacuum doesn't work. Just saying like smoking kills or something like this.
Right.
You have to help them like, okay, so smoking's bad. Now here's what you do to stop. Because otherwise people kind of plug their ears and tune it out, and they don't want to deal with that dissonance of that negative emotion. And so they sort of plug their ears and go, la, 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 la. So if you are going to go the route of inducing a negative emotion, be sure that you're very concrete about the steps that you take to move someone from that negative state that you've induced to that positive state, because nobody wants that noise, right? Like, nobody wants to live in that space for long. Awesome.
I totally agree. And I think the other thing is you have a lot more influence over the way that other people feel in an in-person setting based off of the emotions that you put out there, right? So if you come into a conversation confident, good energy, that is going to be contagious, where if you come in negative, uncertain, uncomfortable, that will rub off. I want to give advisors the permission, because I think the fear-based messages are way too relevant in our industry, to like really revel in the successes. Like when you have that client who just retired, pop that bottle of champagne, like create a culture in your firm with your prospects. It's like, you know what, guys, like, let's feel some joy. Like, let's celebrate these things.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say here is that I hope we as an industry will get more comfortable with emotion broadly, not just because it's a great marketing technique and it's a great sales tool.
Yeah.
It's inherently part of the process. Talking about money, talking about money is inherently emotional. And we have to be willing to get messy. We have to be willing to get emotional with our clients. If we're not doing our jobs. So Kristin, this has been awesome. These 6 are so powerful, and you've given us real practical tools. If advisors want to learn about this LinkedIn presence that I've been raving about, where can folks follow you and follow your work online?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Kristin Shea. So Kristin with an I-N at the end, and Shea is spelled like shea butter, SHEA. Be a good place to start. I haven't really done much on Instagram, but I do have an account that I pretty much post the same stuff. Don't have much of a following there. I haven't really focused on it, but it's Work with Kristin. If you just happen to be more of an Instagram person than a LinkedIn person.
Awesome.
I think that's where we connected, right? LinkedIn, and then DM'd on Instagram. Hey, want to do a podcast?
Yes, LinkedIn. And then we took it to Instagram. So yeah, thank you for coming here, sharing your knowledge with us. This is powerful stuff. And you did what you promised. You gave people practical tools for implementing it in their lives. So thank you so much for being here today. Yeah, this is a joy and an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. I've been a big, massive fan of your work forever. I'm obsessed with everything that you put out and everything that, at least I know that you stand for, unless it's anti-dinosaurs. I'm interested in hearing. Anti-dinosaur. You did learn today that I'm anti-fun, anti-dinosaurs, and emotional ads. So you might have to read. Unless you're just going to be a fun sucker forever. No, I'm just kidding. This has been awesome. I really appreciate being here. There's no one else, honestly, I'd rather talk about this stuff with. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Standard Deviations. If you can't wait till next week for more behavioral finance insights, Visit www.orion.com. All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by Orion and its affiliates, subsidiaries, and employees. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information the participants consider reliable.